Okay, so this is our second lesson on retelling the myth. It focuses on writing dialogue. It should be mostly review. We've been working on writing dialogue through most of the year. So as a reminder, dialogue should move the story forward, should add to the action, should provide character motivation, reveal information. The words should show the character's personality, emotions, thoughts, and reactions. So when you're writing more than one character, it should sound differently. That's what that means. You want to write as the characters, as people actually speak. So they often interrupt each other or don't finish their thoughts. So if they're going to be interrupted, whether it's by somebody else speaking or by an action or something happening, you use a dash for an interruption, not the ellipses, the 3 dots. You only use the 3 dots if the character trails off and voluntarily on their own doesn't finish speaking. Okay? You present dialogue so that it's easy to read, which means you start a new paragraph every time somebody new speaks. So as the conversation goes back and forth, every time a new person is speaking, think about it like turning your head to the new person, right? So if you have to turn your head to look at somebody else, you want to start a new paragraph. We want to identify the speaker with a tag, unless it's clear who's speaking, because there's only 2 characters in the scene. Even then, I don't recommend you go too long without tagging your dialogue with some type of description to add emotion or feeling or action to the scene. So the tags will identify the character who's speaking, but they also help convey the character's emotions and the character's actions, and that's really important. So you want to use quotation marks before and after the words of the speaker. We're going to use a comma to separate those words from our explanatory phrase, which is also called the attribution, because we're attributing it to a character, or the tag, as I said in the previous slide. And those are the phrases at the most basic level that would be something like he said. My favorite dessert is ice cream, Iris said. So in this example, Iris said is our tag, right? It's telling us who's speaking. The verb said is specifically referencing the dialogue that's occurring. It's not any kind of additional action or description of Iris. And then the words that she's speaking are in quotation marks, front and back. No space between the quotation marks, okay? No space here between them and that first letter or at the end, okay? You want to put it after the quotation marks, at the end, before the quotation marks at the beginning, okay? Think of them hugging your words. The comma that separates our dialogue from our tag goes inside the quotation marks, okay? So all punctuation with dialogue goes inside quotation marks. So when the phrase is before, when the explanatory phrase or the tag is before the dialogue, the comma is outside the quotation marks because it's going to come before them. And it's attached to that explanatory phrase or tag. So an example of this would be Robert replied, comma, right? And so our comma is right here, right next to the D with a space after it. And that space is really important because that's what's going to turn your quotation marks the correct direction. If you don't put a space there, they're going to turn the wrong direction for you. Then you have your quotation marks in the words that he's speaking. My favorite dessert is chocolate cake. And you'll notice the period for his sentence is inside that closing set of quotation marks because it's a period, it's the ending of the sentence. When the phrase, the explanatory phrase or tag is after the dialogue, the comma is inside the quotation mark. So it's going to replace the period with a comma because the tag is going to come after. So an example of this, I don't eat dessert very much. Again, no space between your quotation mark and I. The comma here replaces a period. There's no period at all inside because we got the tag immediately following. So you're going to put use a comma instead, and then the period comes after the tag, okay? And in this case, and in this example up here with Iris, Iris and Frank are capitalized because they're names. But if this word is not a name, if it's something like the or a verb added Frank, for example, you would not capitalize it. So you're going to begin the speaker's words, the dialogue itself, with a capital letter. It's the start of their sentence, unless they're continuing a sentence already started because you've put the tag in the middle of the dialogue. So some examples on what we mean with this and the difference. Maddie asked who's home. So you'll notice that here we've got the comma with asked and then who's home, and the W in who is capitalized because it's the start of Maddie's sentence, it's the start of her dialogue. I think Bo said that Dad is. So if we look at this one, the tag here, Bo said, is interrupting our dialogue. The words that Bo is speaking, I think that Dad is one sentence. And so we have our comma separating here inside our quotation marks. We're going to end this with a comma because we're going to continue the sentence, and then it's lowercase with the that, okay, because this is clearly one sentence. It's using some kind of conjunction like that or and or but that indicates for sure we've got the same sentence. Otherwise, it's going to be run like this. So in this case, we have our comma here again, separating our dialogue. I remember now from our tag, Maddie replied. But notice this time it's a period, not a comma, because the next is a complete sentence on its own. Maggie said 2 complete sentences. I remember now he was working from home today. So because of that, we put a period after our tag and we capitalize her second sentence. Okay, so now what happens if it's a question or you want to use an exclamation point? So you're going to simply replace the comma that's inside the dialogue. So that would be this comma right here, this comma right here, right? With the question mark or the exclamation point as appropriate. But you're going to punctuate the tag as if it were a comma. So in this case, again, all of our tags have names, Maggie, Bo, Maddie, right? And so therefore, you would capitalize the name. However, if it's not a name, just because you've now used a question mark or a exclamation point, you don't capitalize that first word in the tag. And here's a good example. So who's that? We use the question mark because the boy asked a question, but you'll notice that the T in the is not capitalized. And the reason for that is that this tag is attached to this dialogue. The verb asked is specifically about how he said the sentence, right? It's saying the sentence. That's the action. The action of asking is saying the sentence. And so therefore, it cannot stand on its own. It needs the dialogue there attached to each other as like one continuous sentence. And so just because we used a question mark here, we still don't capitalize the because it's not a new sentence. It's attached to this dialogue. Okay, so improving tags. We've been working on this. There are 3 ways to improve your tags, right? Those explanatory phrases to make them better and not boring. So the first way is said as dead. So using a verb other than said. Salmon notes number 3 and 4 have 140 different verbs to use. For the most part, everybody's been doing well with this method. So some examples. What do you make of that? He asked, asked being replacing the word said. I beg you not to do that. He cried. And again, cried here replaces said. And what have I done? He whispered, and whispered replaces said. I just want to briefly point out, of course, that we have our question mark, comma, and question mark inside our dialogue. And in each case, the he is not capitalized because it's a pronoun and not the name of a person. Okay, so, but asked, cried, and whispered are all better word choices than said because they give us emotion. And remember, dialogue should be able to give us the characters' feelings, not just their words. So asked tells us it was a question. There's an inflection there. Cried gives us some sense of strong emotion, maybe even a bit of imagery with appealing to the sound of his voice as he would say it. And then whispered certainly is imagery and appeals to our sense of sound, right, with it being a whisper. The second way to improve your explanatory phrases or tags is by using description, right? We can describe what the character's doing, actions while they're speaking, or their appearance while they're speaking. So some examples of this: it's a satyr, Your Majesty, he reported, trying not to laugh. So again, in this case, trying not to laugh is a description of the appearance, the emotion of the character. We have an image in our head of maybe like, kind of like trying to hold it in and what that would look like, a little bit of a bobbing head. Maybe he's got his lips close together with a tight smile on his face, right? Trying to not laugh. Another example, he knew he had made a terrible mistake and decided to beg Dionysus to take back his gift. I will go at once, he cried, but his decision came too late. So we have two sets of description here. The first is his thoughts, right? So we're given what he's thinking, right? And an internal decision that he makes. This is a complete sentence. And so you'll notice that because it is complete sentence, it has nothing to do with how he said his words. It ends in a period. Then we start our dialogue. I will go at once. And then we get our tag, right? He cried, which gives us that emotion that goes with, now we know why he cried, because he realized something, the internal thoughts that he had that come in front of this dialogue. And then it continues with additional description, okay? And so in this case, the period doesn't come until the end of that second set of description. A last example of this: what have I done to you? He cried, kneeling beside her. Again, we have cried here. I didn't do that on purpose. But we have the kneeling beside her. So that is action. So up here we have some internal thoughts and feelings describing the character in the second example. In this third example, we have strict action, kneeling beside her, attached to the tag, describing what he's doing as he says the dialogue. And then the last way is to use adverbs. So adverbs can add that emotional element to a character's words. So there are lists of adverbs on pages 9 and 10 in your buff colored section of your notes. That's that like tan section. An example: you are trespassing in my garden. Midas told him severely. So here severely is modifying told for us and adds some emotion to the word told, which, while better than said, is often overused and doesn't give a lot of emotion on its own. I have learned my lesson, he said softly. So, and I am content. So here we used said, and it's perfectly okay to use verbs like told and said, but they really do need some adverbs. Pump them up a little bit by putting some adverbs with them, which adds to our understanding of how the words were being said, what he was feeling as he said them. Okay, so hopefully this will help you with some of those details in writing dialogue.